Have you ever felt the weight of family expectations or struggled with rejection from those you love most? What if I told you that true peace comes not from seeking their approval, but from trusting in God's plan for your life? In this video, we'll explore the powerful lesson that sometimes walking away from toxic relationships is not an act of abandonment, it's an act of self-preservation. We'll dive into how forgiveness, boundaries, and faith can set you free from the chains of resentment and help you walk in purpose, not others' expectations. If you're tired of letting the opinions of others define your worth, stay tuned. This is your invitation to reclaim your peace and step into the life you were always meant to live. Watch until the end to discover the transformative power of trusting God above all else. Before we start, I'd appreciate your support. If you like the video, please subscribe and hit the bell to stay updated on future lessons from God. Have you ever stopped to reflect on the harsh reality that some of the fiercest battles we face in life are not waged in the world outside, but within the very walls of our own homes? Why is it that those who were meant to lift us, our families, the ones we trust and depend on, are often the very ones who wound us the deepest, leaving scars that seem impossible to heal? Why does love, a force that was meant to heal, nourish, and bind us together, sometimes transform into a weapon of control, manipulation, and destruction? These questions are not new, nor are they unique to any one generation. From the beginning of time, the human story has been shaped by betrayals within the family. Families that should have been sanctuaries of support and love. Cain and Abel's tragic story, Joseph's heart-wrenching betrayal by his brothers, and David's painful conflict with King Saul. These are not just ancient tales. They are a mirror reflecting the timeless struggle that we too must face. Even Jesus, in his divine purity, was rejected by the very people he came to save. And perhaps that is where the greatest agony lies, not only in the pain of betrayal itself, but in the shocking disbelief that those who should have known us best, those who should have stood beside us through thick and thin, are often the very ones who turn against us when we need them the most. But amid this heartache, there is a question that looms large. Why does God allow such suffering to unfold in our lives? Why does He permit the very ones who were meant to be our strongest supporters to become the sources of our deepest pain? Could it be that God is leading us to something greater, teaching us profound lessons about love, strength, and our true identity? When family, the one thing that should offer refuge and love, becomes the wellspring of our suffering, we are left standing at a crossroads. We must decide, do we allow their words, their rejection, and their betrayal to define who we are, or do we choose to rise above it, standing firm in the unshakable truth that our worth is not contingent on their approval, but anchored in the unwavering love of God? God never intended for us to live in bondage, not to family, not to anyone. He never meant for us to sacrifice our peace, our joy, or our purpose on the altar of someone else's expectations. Some might say that walking away from toxic family members is an act of betrayal, but is it true? Or could it be an act of obedience to God, an acknowledgement that He has not called us to a life of endless pain, but to a life of peace and fulfillment? Is it possible that stepping away from the very people who have hurt us is not a sign of failure, but a powerful declaration that we are choosing to honor our dignity, our own mental and emotional health, and most importantly, our relationship with God? Take the life of Joseph as a profound example. Joseph, who was hated and envied by his brothers, betrayed and sold into slavery by the ones who should have loved him the most, found himself stripped of his home, his family, and all he knew. And yet, even as his life seemed to fall apart, God's plan remained steadfast and unbroken. The very act of betrayal, the depths of his pain, were used by God to shape him into the man who would eventually save his family and an entire nation. Joseph did not remain in the pit where his brothers had thrown him. He did not beg to return to the home that had abandoned him. Instead, he rose, unwavering in his trust that God was leading him towards something far greater than he could have ever imagined. What if the suffering you have endured is not meant to destroy you but to elevate you? What if the rejection you have faced is not a punishment but a redirection? What if, in your deepest moments of sorrow and abandonment, God is showing you who truly belongs in your life and who does not? This realization is not an easy one to accept, but it is a crucial truth. Not everyone who shares your blood is meant to walk with you on the path that God has laid before you. Some people will only love you when you meet their expectations, when you bend to their unspoken rules, and when you live your life according to their desires and whims. But the moment you step into the fullness of your calling, the moment you stand firm in your truth, the moment you choose peace over the approval of others, their love can turn cold and conditional. But is that love? Is love something that can be so easily withdrawn when we stop conforming? Is love manipulative, seeking to control rather than set free? Does true love demand that we shrink ourselves, suppressing our identity and our worth just to make others feel comfortable? In the end, we must confront the uncomfortable truth. Not all love is unconditional, and not all family members are meant to be lifelong companions in our journey. But this is not the end of the story. It is a new beginning, a chance for us to redefine what love means, to find peace and strength in God's unchanging love, and to walk boldly toward the life He has destined for us, free from the chains of others' expectations and false love. God's love is not a love that leaves you in chains, unable to break free from the torment that others may impose upon you. His love does not expect you to endure abuse quietly, hiding your pain for the sake of keeping the peace, pretending that everything is fine when your soul is breaking. His love calls you to something far greater, to stand in the truth of who you are, to guard your heart with the fierce protection it deserves, and to live in the identity He has gifted you, even if that means walking away from those who refuse to honor your worth. I know that stepping away from toxic family relationships brings an overwhelming sense of guilt. Society tries to tell us that family is everything, the blood should bind us unconditionally, and that we are supposed to endure all forms of harm and suffering because they are our blood. But God never said this. His word does not command you to endure mistreatment simply because of a shared last name or a family connection. Scripture repeatedly warns us about the danger of allowing harmful relationships to persist in our lives. Do not be deceived. Bad company ruins good morals. 1 Corinthians 15:33. This warning is not limited to friends or strangers. It applies to anyone who poisons your soul, even those you call family. So I ask you, how much longer will you allow yourself to be trapped in a cycle of pain that never seems to end? How much longer will you bear the unbearable weight of their cruel words, their oppressive expectations, and the relentless exhaustion of trying to prove your worth to those who refuse to see it? There comes a moment in every person's life when a choice must be made. Will you stay, hoping that someday, somehow, they will change? That someday they will love you the way you have longed to be loved? Or will you step forward, not in bitterness, not in anger, but in faith, trusting that God has something far greater waiting for you beyond the walls of the place that has caused you so much pain? God does not call you to be a prisoner of anyone's mistreatment. He calls you to peace, wisdom, and strength. He calls you to live in the fullness of your purpose. And sometimes, to walk in that calling, He calls you to walk away. It may feel like a painful separation, but it is only when you release what harms you that you make room for what truly nurtures you. In the end, when you stand before God, He will not ask if you pleased your family. He will ask if you fulfilled your divine purpose. He will ask if you walked in the peace He has prepared for you. He will ask if you lived as His child or as a captive to the expectations, control, and manipulation of others. So I ask you again, who will you choose? The ones who have hurt you, or the God who calls you to wholeness and freedom? Love is a sacred, beautiful gift, created by God to heal, nurture, to build us up. But what happens when love is twisted into something else entirely? What happens when love is no longer freely given, but instead becomes a weapon wielded to control, dominate, and enforce submission? Some claim to love you, but their love is laced with conditions, burdensome expectations, and rules that demand you diminish yourself just to fit into their narrow vision of who you should be. This is not love, this is bondage. And the most insidious kind of captivity is the one that wears the mask of love, pretending to care while suffocating your soul. True love frees you. It lifts you. It calls you to be the best version of yourself, not a version that conforms to someone else's manipulation. And when love is used as a tool for control, it becomes a distortion of God's intention. It becomes an invitation to slavery disguised as affection. Don't fall for it. Step into the freedom that God has designed for you. The freedom to love yourself, to love others rightly, and to receive the love that will truly heal you. Many suffer in silence, burdened by the crushing weight of family control, believing that obedience equates to honor. But let me tell you, honor is not slavery. Honor is not keeping your voice silent in the face of oppression. Honor does not mean that you must allow yourself to be manipulated in the name of love. If love demands that you surrender your identity, if love insists that you live in fear, if love requires you to bury your God-given purpose just to meet another's unspoken demands, then it is not love at all. It is a distortion, it is a deception, and it will never bring you peace. Control can sneak in under the radar, often in the smallest, most insidious ways. It begins with guilt, a subtle remark here, a lingering look of disappointment there, words that seem harmless but chip away at your soul. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? You think you're better than us now. A real son would never act this way. A good daughter would obey. It's a poison wrapped in the familiar, a manipulation so well crafted that you begin to question your worth, your own choices. Slowly, insidiously, you start to shrink yourself, to make yourself small so that others don't feel uncomfortable with your growth. But listen, God never created you to live in chains. His love is not manipulative. His love does not burden you with guilt, dragging you into a cycle of obligation where you must constantly prove your worth to those who refuse to see it. Even Jesus, in his own time of misunderstanding by his earthly family, did not allow himself to be controlled by their expectations. When they came seeking him, assuming they had a right to dictate his actions, he turned to his disciples and asked, "Who is my mother and who are my brothers?" Matthew 12:48. This wasn't a rejection of his family. It was a declaration that true family is not based on control, but on spiritual alignment. If Jesus, the Son of God, did not allow his earthly ties to dictate his divine purpose, why should you? Why should you let anyone, no matter how close, hold power over your calling, your peace, and your future? Why should you live in the shadow of their expectations when God has called you into his light? Control does not always show itself in words. Sometimes it appears in silence, the absence of love, the withdrawal of affection, the cold distance that appears when you refuse to conform. You notice it when you stop living for their approval, and suddenly they act as if you no longer exist. They punish you, not with anger, but with indifference, and in your desperation you return, trying to earn back their warmth, willing to sacrifice your peace just to feel like you belong again. But the real question is, belong to what? A family that only accepts you when you obey? A love that disappears the moment you refuse to be controlled? That is not the love of God. That is the love of man, and the love of man is fickle, conditional, and fragile. God's love does not hold you hostage. It does not force you to be someone you are not. It does not shame you for becoming who He created you to be. Love that demands you to shrink, to silence yourself, or to live in fear is not love. It is captivity. There comes a moment when you must recognize the stark difference between love and control, between honor and enslavement, between duty and destruction. Ask yourself, does their love bring you peace, or does it bring you fear? Does it lift you closer to God, or does it leave you drowning in doubt and confusion? Does it support your growth, or does it demand that you remain small so that they can remain comfortable in their limitations? God did not create you to live in fear of those who claim to love you. He did not design you to be a prisoner in your own family. He calls you to truth, and the truth is this: love that demands your silence is not love. Love that requires your suffering is not love. Love that controls, manipulates, and binds you in guilt is not love. It is chains wrapped in the illusion of belonging. And God has come to break every chain. Boundaries are not walls built out of selfishness. They are gates of wisdom. They do not keep love out. They protect your heart from harm. Yet when it comes to family, setting boundaries can feel like an act of betrayal. The guilt creeps in, whispering that you are being ungrateful, that you are turning your back on the people who raised you, that to love your family means to endure all things, even their mistreatment. But God never commanded you to destroy yourself in the name of keeping the peace. Some believe that family has an unlimited right to your time, your mind, your emotions, and even your obedience. They believe that love means access to your thoughts, your choices, and your future. And when you try to step away, when you dare to say no, when you choose to protect your peace, they call it disrespect. But is it truly disrespect? Or is it self-preservation? Is it truly disrespectful to protect your well-being, your God-given purpose, and your peace of mind from those who refuse to respect your autonomy? You are not obligated to live in fear of the ones who claim to love you. God's love has set you free, and that freedom is yours to embrace. Protect it. Guard your heart. Choose peace. Consider Christ Himself, perfect in love, radiant in grace, yet unyielding in His divine purpose. Though He walked the earth embodying love in its most complete form, He did not allow Himself to be controlled by the expectations of others. When His own family sought to interrupt His teachings, assuming that their blood bond gave them the authority to dictate His actions, He did not rush to please them. Instead, with wisdom beyond comprehension, He turned to His disciples and declared, "My mother and my brothers are those who hear the word of God and do it." Luke 8:21. Jesus did not deny His earthly family, nor did He devalue them, but He made it abundantly clear that His higher calling, His mission from God, was not to be defined by earthly relationships or by the constraints of family expectations. His purpose transcended the limitations imposed by mere human connection. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If Christ, in all His divine wisdom and boundless love, set boundaries to preserve His higher calling, how much more must we, in our human frailty and vulnerability, protect the space we need to walk out our God-given destiny? Yet the moment we begin to distance ourselves from toxic family dynamics, the accusations come pouring in. You've changed. You think you're too good for us now. The guilt, swift and relentless, seeks to undo the boundaries we've set. Family is supposed to stick together, they say, as if mere proximity to one another should grant them access to every aspect of your life. But we must ask ourselves, are these the words of genuine love, or are they the words of control? True love does not demand the sacrifice of your peace, your mental well-being, your joy, or your soul's tranquility. True love does not manipulate or demand that you endure harm simply because of a shared family name. When you are asked to sacrifice your very identity, your sense of self, in the name of love, it is no longer love. It is a form of bondage. There is a lie that has been deeply ingrained within us. The lie that setting boundaries with family is an act of rebellion, that it is somehow abandoning your duty as a son or daughter, a sibling or a parent. But in truth, setting boundaries is one of the most profound acts of faith you can perform. It is a bold declaration that you trust God enough to separate yourself from what harms you, even if that harm comes from the ones you love most. Boundaries are not acts of disobedience. They are acts of obedience to God's word. God never calls his children to be prisoners of manipulation or dysfunction, even when that manipulation and dysfunction come in the form of family. We must remember, we are not called to live in chains that bind us to people who refuse to see our worth, to people who use their familial connection as leverage to control our lives, to manipulate our decisions, and to silence our voices. Some people will never understand the need for your boundaries. They will view your distance as a rejection of them, your silence as an act of defiance, and your peace as an insult to their authority. But the truth is this: people who have long benefited from your lack of boundaries will always be offended when you finally establish them. They have grown accustomed to having unlimited access to your life without your consent, to having control over your thoughts, your choices, and your time. They have built their comfort on your discomfort, their sense of power on your fear, and when you choose to step away and protect your peace, they will not celebrate your growth, they will condemn it. They will resist your progress and even attempt to guilt you back into the chaos you've worked so hard to escape. But let this truth sink in. They do not want your freedom. They want your submission. But God does not. God does not call you to endure abuse for the sake of family. He does not demand that you suffer endlessly to prove your love, to prove your devotion, to prove your loyalty. God has called you to peace. He has called you to wisdom. His word is clear. The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. Proverbs 22:0. Boundaries are not cruelty. They are wisdom. They are not walls built to keep love out. They are gates that guard your heart, separating what is harmful from what is holy. They are the firm voice that rises within you, declaring, "I love you, but I will not allow you to destroy me." Setting boundaries is a declaration of self-respect, divine wisdom, and the truth that God has called you to a life of peace, not one of constant turmoil. In a world that tells you to sacrifice yourself, to shrink yourself, to make yourself small for the comfort of others, God calls you to something radically different. He calls you to protect your peace, to defend your heart, and to preserve your joy. God calls you to walk boldly in the truth of who you are, His child, precious, loved, and worthy of peace. Setting boundaries, especially with family, can feel like an act of betrayal, a painful severing of relationships that were once cherished. The guilt will creep in like an unwelcome guest, whispering that you are being ungrateful, that you are turning your back on the very people who raised you, and that love means enduring all things, even mistreatment. But God never commanded you to destroy yourself in the name of keeping the peace. He never asked you to remain in unhealthy, toxic relationships that tear you down instead of building you up. God's love does not ask you to endure suffering for the sake of appeasing others. God's love asks you to stand firm in your identity, to protect the heart He has given you, and to walk in His truth. Some believe that family has an unlimited right to your time, your emotions, your thoughts, and your choices. They believe that love means unrestricted access to every part of you, no matter the cost to your well-being. And when you try to step away, when you dare to say no, when you choose to protect your peace, they will call it disrespect. They will try to make you believe that your decision to walk in peace is an act of defiance, that by protecting yourself, you are somehow dishonoring them. But is it truly disrespectful to protect your own heart? Is it truly disrespectful to live in the freedom God has called you to? Is it disrespectful to choose self-preservation when the alternative is self-destruction? The answer is no. God did not create you to live in fear of those who claim to love you. He did not design you to be a prisoner in your own family. He has called you to live in truth, to walk in peace, and to love with wisdom. And when it comes to setting boundaries, you are not rejecting love. You are defining it. You are saying, I love you, but I will not allow you to destroy me. I love you, but I will protect my peace. I love you, but I will walk in the calling God has placed on my life, even if it means stepping away from the dysfunction that has defined our relationship. When you set boundaries, you are not denying love, you are affirming it. You are affirming your love for yourself, your love for your purpose, and your love for God. You are affirming your belief that you are worthy of peace, worthy of joy, and worthy of the freedom that comes from walking in the truth of who you are. God has set you free, and that freedom is yours to embrace. Protect it, guard it, and step boldly into the life He has prepared for you. And if some refuse to respect your boundaries, if some insist that love means control, then perhaps it is not your boundaries that need to change, but your understanding of who truly belongs in your life. Because love that refuses to honor your peace, love that seeks to manipulate and dominate rather than nurture and support, is not love at all. It is something else entirely, something toxic, something that erodes the soul, leaving nothing but brokenness behind. People's voices can grow louder than God's over time. Their opinions begin to infiltrate your decisions. Their doubts become your doubts, and their negativity starts to seep into the very core of your faith. Before you know it, you're no longer walking in the path that God has laid before you. You're walking in the expectations of others. You're living according to a script written by people who may never fully understand the depth of your calling, and who may never fully appreciate the purpose God has given you. But there's good news. God has already prepared people for you. He has already chosen those who will walk beside you on this journey, people who will understand you without explanation, lift you when you're weak, pray for you, fight for you, and stand by your side. These are the people who truly belong in your life. They will remind you of who you are when the world, or even your own family, tries to make you forget. But to make room for these people, to make room for what God has prepared for you, you must first be willing to let go of those who don't belong. You cannot keep your life filled with toxic, draining relationships and expect to find the people who will sustain you. You cannot keep walking with those who only take from you, who feed off your energy and leave you empty, and still expect to encounter the kind of people who will pour into you, who will challenge you to grow, and who will encourage you to rise to your highest potential. It takes courage, tremendous courage, to separate yourself, to step forward, to let go, and to trust that God will not leave you alone in your loneliness. He is calling you into something greater, something more fulfilling, something that aligns with His plan for your life. Even Jesus with His 12 disciples had only 3 who were closest to Him, Peter, James, and John. Not everyone was meant to go where He went. Not everyone was invited to see what He saw. And so it is with you. Some people will only walk with you for a season, some were never meant to stay, and some must be left behind for you to move forward in the direction God has set for you. It isn't cruelty, and it isn't selfishness. It is wisdom. It is divine clarity. It is walking in the confidence that God will bring you the right people, the ones who will support, strengthen, and uplift you. If someone does not feed your faith, if they do not bring you closer to God, if they do not encourage your growth, if they weigh you down with negativity or make you feel small in the pursuit of your purpose, perhaps they were never meant to walk this road with you. Let them go. Trust that God will bring the right people at the right time. The true family God has for you is not defined by blood alone, but by spirit, by mutual understanding, by unconditional support, by a shared purpose in Christ. The right people, chosen by God, will never require you to diminish yourself just to be accepted. They will not ask you to shrink, to silence your truth, or to hide your light. They will accept you as you are and encourage you to be everything God has called you to be. But what happens when family, the people who should love you most, turn against you? When their words cut deep, when their rejection makes you question your very worth, where do you turn? If your foundation has always been in their approval, their rejection will shake you to your core. It will leave you questioning everything, your identity, your purpose, your worth. But if your foundation is in God, if it is rooted in His truth, no amount of betrayal, no amount of criticism, no amount of rejection can break you. God's love is unshakable, and it is the only foundation that can withstand the storms of life. Pain can either drive you toward God or push you away from Him. Some, when faced with family rejection, become bitter, angry, and hardened. They close their hearts to love, believing that if even their blood doesn't love them, then love itself must be an illusion. Others sink into despair, carrying the weight of rejection as though it were an unbearable burden. But there is a higher way, a divine way. When family becomes the enemy, it is not a sign that you are alone. It is an invitation to trust God more deeply. Throughout Scripture, we see that those chosen by God were often rejected by men. Joseph's brothers threw him into a pit, hoping to destroy him. Moses was rejected by his people before leading them to freedom. David was despised by his brothers before becoming the king of Israel. Even Jesus was mocked by his own family. Rejection isn't the end of the story. It is the beginning of something greater. It is the refining process that God uses to shape you, strengthen your faith, and prepare you for what is ahead. If you base your worth on how your family treats you, then their rejection will feel like a curse. It will tear at your soul, and it will make you question your value. But if you understand that God alone defines you, if you believe that your identity is rooted in Him and not in the fickle opinions of others, then rejection becomes something else entirely. Rejection becomes a tool in God's hands, used to separate you from what isn't meant for your destiny. God allows certain relationships to break so that you can lean fully on Him. When everything else falls away, He remains. This is the moment to decide. Will you trust in man, or will you trust in God? Human love is fragile and conditional, but God's love is steady, eternal, and unshakable. Trusting in Him more than people will render their opinions powerless. Their rejection won't cripple you, because you'll understand that their approval was never your source of identity. God was, and still is. Trusting in God is not just knowing that He loves you. It's believing that He has a plan, even in your suffering. It's standing firm when everything feels like it's falling apart, and holding on to your faith when the very people you thought would always be there for you turn their backs. Remember Joseph. Though his brothers meant to harm him, God used it for good. What if your rejection is not a curse, but a divine setup for something greater? What if the cruelty you've experienced is not the end of your story, but the beginning of your testimony? Trust that God is refining you in the fire, so that you may emerge stronger, wiser, and unbreakable. Faith means trusting God when everything feels like it's falling apart. It's believing that He's working even when you can't see it, and standing firm when the people you love most walk away. This world will disappoint you, people will fail you, and family will hurt you. But God remains. When you trust in Him, you'll find a peace that no betrayal can shake, a peace that surpasses all understanding. God's peace will guard your heart, and His love will sustain you, no matter the rejection or pain you face. Forgiveness is one of the most difficult lessons to learn, particularly when it comes to family, the people we expect to love us unconditionally, the ones whose words and actions shape so much of our self-worth. When family wounds you deeply, the natural response is to hold on to resentment, replaying past rejections, hurtful words and betrayals over and over in your mind. It's tempting to keep score, to cling to the pain as a way of protecting yourself. But forgiveness is not about forgetting or excusing the hurt. It is not about pretending the pain never happened or sweeping it under the rug. True forgiveness is about releasing the burden of resentment, allowing it to no longer poison your soul and hinder your growth. It's about freeing yourself from the chains of anger and bitterness, understanding that forgiveness doesn't diminish the significance of the hurt, but it frees you from its control. Forgiveness is for you, not for them. It is not a form of weakness or acquiescence to the mistreatment you've endured. Rather, it is a powerful act of self-liberation. It doesn't mean that you forget what was done or pretend that everything is okay. It doesn't mean you must remain in harmful relationships or continue allowing toxic behavior to affect your life. Even Jesus, in His infinite grace, forgave those who crucified Him, but did not place Himself back in their hands. He did not enable the very people who caused His suffering. He forgave, but He set boundaries. Forgiveness means releasing the pain and the anger, but it doesn't mean giving access to those who continue to harm you. It means loving them from a distance, praying for them, but not sacrificing your peace for their approval. It's important to realize that some family members may never change, no matter how much you forgive them. No amount of love or forgiveness will suddenly make them see your worth or treat you with the respect and kindness you deserve. Boundaries are not a sign of a lack of forgiveness, they are a sign of wisdom. Setting boundaries is often the greatest act of love you can offer, both to yourself and to them. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to remove yourself from the situation so that your actions no longer have the power to harm you. True family, those who are meant to walk with you in life, are the ones who support your growth, nourish your spirit, and help you flourish. If a family member leads you away from God or constantly brings you pain, ask yourself what kind of family that truly is. You can love them, you can forgive them and still walk away. You can let go of the anger, but you don't have to hand them the keys to your peace again. There comes a moment in every person's life when you must choose between pleasing others and protecting your peace. If your family has become a source of conflict, manipulation, or emotional drain, the choice becomes clear. Do you continue seeking their approval at the cost of your well-being, or do you choose peace? Even if it means walking away, even if it means facing the fear of being misunderstood, even if it means facing the isolation that often accompanies standing up for yourself. God never called you to live in bondage to the opinions and expectations of others. His desire is for you to walk in His peace, not in fragile, conditional approval. Even Jesus didn't live for the validation of others. He spoke to the He walked on purpose, and He didn't seek glory from humans. His identity was not tied to the fickle praise of those around Him. So many people live imprisoned by the fear of rejection, constantly suppressing their voice, sacrificing their dreams, and bending their identity just to gain family approval. But what if, no matter how much you give or change, it will never be enough for them? What if your deepest desire for acceptance can never be met because it is being demanded under the wrong conditions? Then, my friend, it's time to choose peace. Stop chasing love that isn't freely given. Stop performing for people who won't applaud your authenticity. Stop exhausting yourself in a game you weren't meant to win. The peace that God gives surpasses all understanding. It doesn't depend on others' moods or judgments. It doesn't waver with every change of opinion or shifting expectation. It's a peace that allows you to walk away from toxic relationships without fear. It's a peace that strengthens you to say, I love you, but I won't destroy myself for you. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Some people may not understand your decision to choose peace. They might call you selfish, accuse you of abandoning your family, or even attempt to guilt you into staying in a situation that harms you. But choosing peace is not an act of rejection. It is an act of self-preservation. God has not called you to live a life of constant conflict, constant sorrow, or constant emotional strain. He has called you to a life where you can breathe freely, where you can grow, where you can flourish in His purpose. Sometimes, your greatest blessings will only come once you release what's holding you back, the toxic people, the harmful relationships, and the dysfunctional dynamics. Love should not come with conditions. True family, those who walk alongside you in the journey of life, support your growth. Your worth is not determined by whether others accept you or approve of your choices. It's found in the embrace of your Creator, in the love He has lavished upon you. Forgive. Let go of the anger and the resentment that weighs so heavily on your heart. Set boundaries for your well-being. Trust that God is guiding you toward something greater, toward people who will love and support you as you are. Let go of what isn't meant for you, and trust that He will bring the right people at the right time. Your peace is worth protecting, and God's love is the foundation you can stand on, no matter how many times others fail you. Walk confidently, knowing that your worth is not based on their acceptance, but on the eternal love of your Heavenly Father. As we wrap up today's message, I want to take a moment to reflect on what we've discussed. We've explored the importance of forgiveness, not as a way to excuse the hurt, but as a way to free ourselves from resentment and bitterness. We've learned that setting boundaries is not a sign of a lack of forgiveness, but a sign of wisdom and self-respect. And we've seen how sometimes choosing peace over approval is the greatest act of self-love and obedience to God. So I ask you, what have you learned from this message? What is one thing you can take from today's discussion and apply to your life moving forward? I would love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below and share with us one thing you're committed to practicing in your life today. If you found this video helpful, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support means the world to us, and we want to keep providing content that empowers and uplifts you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.